So that's where we want to kick off today. How did the Kansas people get here? They got here by rail, but they couldn't get here by rail until 1902. The railroad had gone into Delta and beyond in 1882, but not up this way. There was not a spur up this way. So on September the 18th, 1902, they had a big celebration in town called what? Railroad Day. Railroad Day. And Railroad Day was a party. They had bands and they had all kinds of things that people could get excited about. I should say that before they got here, George Duke was kind of fond of traveling around by train. Here's a couple of train tickets that he had before there was any train here. He was headed to, where was he going this time? Chicago one time, and this time he was going from Colorado Springs to California. The first trip that he took, or that we have a ticket for, was on September 10th. This ticket expired September 30th in 1908. So 6 years after the thing had rained here, he was still riding the train. In fact, he was inventing a thing called a lock nut that the railroads were interested in to help to keep the cars from disjointing and running off on their own someplace. And he made some money at that, and so he was one of the big financiers. One of the things that we just achieved was that there was a whole list of people, business people around town, that says, "We, the undersigned, hereby subscribe the amount set opposite our names for the purposes of defraying the expenses of Railroad Day. All money subscribed to be paid before July 29, 1902. And so all the names of the businesses in town are in here, and how much they pledged. George Duke, for example, or Duke Brothers Company, pledged $100.
That's a lot more.
At 2% inflation for however many years, 122 years, that was like, giving up our pension. It was but you might be interested in some of the names of the people that own businesses or that pledged money for the Railroad Day. It's on this list. You're welcome to take a look at that. Everybody who came to it was given a ribbon. It says, "Look out for the cars." When you guys were in elementary school, did you have this little riddle? No? How does it go? Railroad crossings,
Yeah,
look out for the cars.
yeah.
Can you spell that without any R's?
That was before my time. That really was.
Well, you can spell that, T-H-A-T, and you get the answer. This is a little envelope that was provided for them to put their money in to help finance this venture. Hotchkiss Railroad Day, September 18th, and here's what it says about Hotchkiss. Let's see if this is your view of this place. Hotchkiss is located 23 miles east of Delta on the North Fork branch of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad and the center of the famous North Fork Valley, an agricultural and horticultural empire. Is an enterprising town of about, what do you think the population of Hotchkiss was in 1902?
2.
It's an enterprising town of about 600 souls.
Oh, wow.
It was more than that.
A third of those came from Osborne County, Kansas. Incomparable scenic and climatic attractions is a town where health, comfort, happiness, and prosperity reign supreme. Is that a description of the town that you know?
Yes.
In some ways it is. Recently, we had a young lady who lives over by the Methodist Church who brought us a remembrance of Railroad Day. Her name was Meta Riley. You guys know Meta Riley? This was something she wrote in May of 1955. She said, the title was North Fork's First Train. The first train reached Hotchkiss September 18, 1902. Coal had been discovered near the present sites of Hotchkiss, Paonia, Bowie, Somerset, and Oliver. The government allowed the filing of coal claims, and many ranches had staked out claims. Ed Hansen Mason, Ed Hansen and also a banker and an entrepreneur in town, had bought up land around where the town of Somerset now stands, and he had sold it to the Utah Fuel and Iron Company, which was an affiliate of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad at the time, and it was built into the valley. This, together with the booming fruit industry, livestock trade, and the recently purchased mine at Somerset, resulted in the building of the North Fork's first railroad. Fay Rockwell was superintendent of this division of the Denver and Rio Grande, and he supervised construction of the road from Delta to Somerset. The train reached Hotchkiss on September 18th, 1902, and the mountain at that momentous day has gone down in local history as Railroad Day. There was a big demonstration of lots of races, bucking horses, and speeches to welcome the future carrier of civilization into the North Fork Valley. Benches were set up from which to view the rodeo, and the street was lined with people. The races were run on Bridge Street. That's not the main street in Tang. I mean, it is the main street, but there's a street here called Main Street, but it's not the main street.
That's confusing.
Beginning at the corner where, that she notes in 55, Wolfenbarger's station now stands. You remember Wolfenbarger's? Yeah. Some of you remember the station, probably. Right. And ending at the old blacksmith shop in the west end of town. Whose blacksmith shop would that have been? Pardon me?
My dad's.
No, on the west end of town.
What's here?
Her dad had the one on the east end of town. Ron Schaefer was her dad. But the one that on the west side was Frank Dodge, the blacksmith shop. Frank's brother married the first telephone operator in town. What was her name?
Della.
Pardon me?
Della Dodge. Yeah.
What? What's her first name?
Ellen Dodge, right?
I don't know about Ella. Do we know it? Yeah.
There were two sisters
she
who
was the
married
one-
Dodges.
Pardon me?
There were two sisters who married Dodges, and they were both telephone operators.
Right.
Nellie.
Maybe they married the same
She was the operator in Crawford. She was the operator in Crawford before she was the operator in Hotchkiss. Nellie Dodge.
And she knew everybody's business in town, right?
Yeah, the pictures of it.
Yeah, because it was telephone.
They called, her name was Central. They called Central. They would call Central and say, "Do you know where my mom and dad are?" Yeah, they're over at the Jones place.
Or they just listen on the party line.
So the band was playing, there were races, bucking horses, and speeches to welcome the future carrier of civilization into the North Fork Valley. The benches were set up from which people could watch. The races were run on Bridge Street, beginning at the corner of the Wolfenbergers. The cowboys were very cooperative and furnished much amusement. With their thrills and spills, the railroad was a narrow gauge. You know what that means?
Yeah.
3-foot narrow gauge?
Pardon me?
3-foot narrow gauge?
Yeah, they were closer together, and the rail itself was not as big as the standard gauge that came by 1908. Okay?
There was a narrow gauge through Black Canyon too.
Right. In
With a
fact,
toll road, right?
pardon me?
With a toll road?
No. No. When the track was finished to Paonia, the train crew invited everyone who wanted a free ride to Paonia and back to climb on the 2-seat cars behind the work engine. Do you remember what was close to the engine? The
Coal,
firebox.
yeah,
And it was
firebox
hot.
for coal.
We were all there, and the engine crawled at a snail's pace to Paonia and then back to Hotchkiss. And literally, they backed to Hotchkiss because they had no turn. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad reached Delta from Gunnison in 1882, which we've observed, and the mail was carried from Delta into the North Fork by anyone who happened to be journeying up the valley. Frank Wade was the first paid mail carrier in the valley. The federal government paid him $30 for a 3-month service in 1883. He delivered the mail once a week, riding to Delta on horseback each Saturday and returning on Sunday. Joseph Rich followed, and he used a spring wagon. He delivered the mail 3 times a week in his spring wagon express. The railroad went on through to Somerset that winter. So when we think about the past, it's really difficult for me to think about no cars. This was a time when there were no combustion engines, no cars, and so everything was done by horse and buggy or just horseback or whatever, or walking. But somebody found this place, including a couple of guys from Paonia. Tuesday morning at the depot, there was a right snappy little fight between Paonia people. It seems that a man by the name of Susie, who has been running a roller skating rink there, was owing a bill to Hockett, a liveryman, a bill to the Independent Lumber Company, and another bill to W.F. Conine. Susie drove to Hotchkiss during the night in order to get away, but Hockett and Conine and Siebert came on the train in the morning and met the gentleman at the depot. After a few words, Conine waded into the matter with his good right arm. He means he didn't have a left hand. And there was things doing for a few minutes. Marshal Thompson butted into the affair and stopped the fun. Susie got on the train, Conine followed him, and the wind-up will likely occur in Delta. That was in the Hotchkiss Herald, January 8, 1909. So that is one of the work that the newspaper research gals have done, is they run across the things in their search of these old newspapers, they make a copy of it, and it's put in a file, which we have here in our subject files, so we can access them. And so, not long after that, in August of 1909, the depot safe was blown open. Late Tuesday night or early Wednesday morning, residents of town living near the depot were startled by an explosion of some sort. But as nothing seemed to come of it, no more attention was paid. The next morning, however, it was discovered that the depot had been broken into, the safe blown open, and all the receipts of the day before taken. Just how much was taken, nobody but the railroad company knows. The clock in the ticket room was stopped at 20 minutes past 1. So it's thought that that's the time the robbery occurred. Several men who had been hanging around the depot and the beat tipple.
The what temple?
You know what a beat tipple is? So
Sugar beets.
when John and I were in school, he's quite a bit younger than I, but we were still in school. Over there by where the depot was a huge sugar beet tipple, where they took beets from here to Delta to the sugar beet factory. And so there was a huge, huge pile. Remember that, Helen? Yeah, the beet pile. Anyway, they'd been hanging around the depot and the beet tipple for several days, and they're suspected of the crime. They're all fairly well dressed in black clothes, but acted suspiciously, and several of our leading citizens have been heard to say that they did not think they were here for any good. One of these men was in the Times office the day before the robbery, inquiring if the strike at Marble had been settled yet. So it may be that was their objective point of, after they had finished the job, to go to Marble. That was in August of 1909. But later in August, these three men were arrested in Montrose
Oh my goodness.
on Saturday night, who were supposed to be the fellows who used nitroglycerin on the safe at the depot here last week. They had a supply of fuse and nitro with them. There's not much doubt but what these men are the ones who are wanted, and they were taken to Delta where they will be held for trial. And then at the bottom it says, on Saturday last in the district court, Judge Shackelford pronounced sentence on the prisoners in the county jail, H.L. McClay and James Black, the Hotchkiss safe blowers, being condemned to serve not more than 30, but not less than 25 years in the penitentiary. And Sheriff Williams, accompanied by Detective French of the Rio Grande, left for Canyon City with the prisoners on the afternoon train. So this happened in August. They went to trial in September. They're in Penn in October. I guess if you want a speedy trial, come to Hotchkiss. So, the depot now has a new safe to replace the one that's been blown up a couple of times by robbers to get the rebate coin. The new one will stand more dynamite than the old one, so all robbers, please take warning and bring a wagon load of explosives. And then finally, in September of 1915, on the front page of the Hotchkiss Herald, remember the ribbon said, "Watch out for the cars"? Well, this is not Model Ts and Model As. These are railroad cars, right? Watch out for the cars on the crossings. The title of this is Safety First. I cannot endorse too strongly the splendid movement now carried on by our railways and traction companies for safeguarding in every possible way the life of the traveling public. I shudder to think what would happen if the traveling public was killed. Whenever I read over the instructions and the rules of conduct now printed by our best railways for the promotion of safety, I glow with pleasure. My only complaint is that there's not enough of these rules. I venture to propose a few additional ones as follows. First, in alighting from a train, do not attempt to throw yourself out the window.
Oh,
That's a silly thing
rule.
to do. Do not alight. In fact, do not even descend until the train, at least a considerable part of it, has stopped. Thirdly, do not try to stop a train by seizing it by the cowcatcher. You know cowcatchers? That dates you a little bit if you know a cowcatcher. It's that pointed thing that was on the beginning of the engine that caught cows on the track. That's mere madness, he says. Never lie down across the rails in front of an incoming train. Never attempt to jump from the roof of a train to the roof of the depot. Remember the danger of crossing a level crossing, the danger of crossing a level crossing with a horse and a buggy. Do not do it. Get the buggy over first, safely and quietly, then the horse or the mule, as the case may be, last of all yourself. In a railway depot, do not stick your head through the ticket wicket at the moment when the clerk is about to slam it down. Do not heap dangerously heavy luggage in the rack over your head. Put it over somebody else's.
That's right.
Now, there's lots of other things too.
Somebody did that stuff.
really good.
So that's enough railroad stuff. The other folder, though, if you're in that railroad history or interested in some of the things about the railroads in this way early on, there's another folder here just about railroads. This folder is about railroad depots, and this folder is about railroads. And from 1905 to 1910, many of the articles in here is about the railroad spur that was being proposed to go from here to Crawford. There was a company back east that had discovered a rich vein of gypsum down in Red Canyon, south of Crawford. They wanted to build a railroad spur from Hotchkiss to there to haul it out for the cement business. I don't know how you use gypsum cement, but I didn't look it up, so I don't know. But they said it was going to cost $500,000, and they were willing to put up $300,000 to get it done. If citizens in Hotchkiss and Crawford would come up with the other $200,000. And many of the things that are in here are a record of many, many meetings that were held by the Businessmen's Association of Hotchkiss and Crawford to see if they could get people to put money into it, to buy a piece of the action. It never happened. Consequently, there never was a spur up there, and that finally lost its. The investors lost their interest in it.